Hey everyone, Pastor George here with today's Theolog Mailbag, and as you can see, I'm from home today for reasons I will not disclose, but I'm coming at you today from my home, so it's exciting. All the glories of an apartment in Piscataway, New Jersey. Now, the question that we have today is, what is the controversy about singing Christmas carols before Christmas Day? And is there any theological basis for either position? So I'll be honest, I didn't learn about this, and I want to use this word very purposely, controversy, until pretty recently. I didn't even know that this was a thing. I knew it before this question was asked, but I learned it this year. I didn't know that this was like a thing that people did, where you weren't supposed to sing Christmas songs before Christmas Day. So I'm going to start with the second part, the theological basis for the position, and then I'll explain, because that explains why it's a controversy. So, or non-controversy, in my opinion. Because even the people who talk about this don't do this entirely. So this all comes down to the seasons of the church, right? Which are later inventions of churches in order to mark apart seasons. So you have like ordinary time, which makes up the biggest part of the year. And then you have, of course, Lent, and then Easter, and on it goes, right? And now we're in the season of Advent, and then we're in the Christmas season, and then Epiphany, and then back to ordinary time. And there's like different feasts during the year, right? So like Christ is King Sunday, Christ the King Sunday, Pentecost, season of Pentecost, things like that, right? And at church, you can see this in the banners that we hang on the parapets and things like that, because they mark the colors in the seasons of the year. So that's the purpose of it. And the theological reason people do this is because obviously this is not something that's talked about in the New Testament, right? This is something that is later taken and used by the church as a devotional thing, right? So, which is not a bad thing. I mean, I don't really care about this stuff, but I don't think it's bad, right? I think it's like a choice that if you like this stuff, do it. If you don't, then you don't have to. But it was made devotional, right? Obviously, kind of based off of the seasons of worship that Israel would have in the Old Testament, right? About around these certain holy days that they would celebrate. So you can see how this stuff kind of develops, and then it becomes very regimented. So whereas before it was kind of like a new thing, it ends up becoming a big part of church life. So you end up having, Lent have all these other restrictions that come with it, right? So if anyone grew up Catholic, you'll remember probably not eating meat on Fridays during Lent, or Fridays at all, depending on, I guess, what your priest said and told you. It used to be that there was just no meat at all during Lent, right? Or at least nothing that wasn't fish. So a lot of these things are later traditions, and the point of these things is to set aside your heart and to think about what's going on, right? So just like people talk about giving up things for Lent today, one of the things that you would do in order to talk or to remember that Advent is about the coming of Jesus, not about his birth, right? So you would not sing Christmas carols during that time, because Christmas carols are for Christmas season, which is December 25th onward, all right, until Epiphany. And so that's the time that you would sing Christmas carols, because you're remembering the birth of Jesus in that time. You're not remembering the promise of his coming or his coming again, which Advent is all about. So people would say, right, you don't sing Christmas songs during Advent. The theological reason, it's more of like a spiritual practice that, hey, you don't do this because you set aside this time of the year to remember that Jesus is coming. I think the theological opposite position to that, which is, I guess, the one that I would take, although I really think this isn't so much an opinion of theology. I think this is more really just an opinion of taste. I think you can cloak it with theological reasoning, but at the end of the day, because all of this stuff is so is a fabrication, and by that I don't mean fake, but I just mean made, right? Like it's made up by humans, that you can't really be bound by these things, right? It's much more of a choice. And I think, honestly, if I were to think about this biblically, I would think about the idea that a lot of people, or at least the way that I engaged with these things growing up, was that it ends up becoming a performatory thing, which is why I always really struggle during Lent and Advent to do sermon series, because I'd hate being constrained by things that are going on around us, because I'd rather much focus on the text. So just because it happens to be December 11th, then I have to do an Advent series, right? Or people who are expecting that will be upset or something, right? Or it's part of the church calendar. How can you not do it? So I think part of it is also a kickback against this idea that this is actually something that is, that there's this idea that it's sacred because it's always been done, when in reality it hasn't always been done, and a lot of the strictures end up becoming way too restrictive on people, like telling them they can't sing certain songs. And to that, I would just like to again point to Isaiah 1, where God is telling them that he doesn't care about their feasts or their sacrifices, but he cares about the heart. And there's nothing to say that we can't sing Christmas songs in any time of the year, other than the fact that it's kind of weird just for us to do that mentally, right? It's weird to sing these songs outside of the time that we usually think about. So I don't think that I think it's very much a controversy. I don't think there's any controversy to it, because even in liturgical traditions, there are priests and pastors who break this all the time. So people who would hold to this would tend to be Lutherans and Episcopalians, or Anglicans generally, Catholics, but even within them, they have plenty of priests and pastors that don't listen, they don't think about that type of thing. So, and I think that really goes to show that this is just something that people like to argue about without really needing argue really, without much of a reason why, one way or another. So it's a good question and appropriate for the season. So thank you for sending that along. I will see all of you guys on Sunday for worship. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and peace out.